Hey. So back at the build bench here, and of course it's time to carry on with part 2 of the comp toy build. I want to show you a bit about what went on with the tire stuff. There's some cool stuff went on after I got all those rings printed on there. If you don't know what I'm talking about with the 3D printed inner rings, have a look at the first video. I talked about that and showed that off, and so here's how this actually looks on the truck. You can see that there's lots of tire squish, no problem. I'll have no problem getting traction on this or tire squish, but I want you to see how it works with the side hilling and stuff. Like if I get the truck tipped over, I mean there's so much bite on that corner of the tread right there, it's just amazing. So that's kind of why I'm interested in doing that in that trick. Now, we talked about in the first video getting the front end set up. What I did to kind of help locate the body on this is I actually made these little tiny notches here. You see these little notches? There's just small little tiny nicks I put in there in the body, and then when I'm sitting it on the frame, those notches kind of clip in here so that I can kind of get the body squared away really easily without having to fight with it all the time to just get it on. So I put some notches there, and then in the back I was using these 3D printed pieces of junk here that I screwed onto a plate, to a cross member, and that just kind of holds it. So what I actually did is I CA'd a couple of little dabs of plastic styrene junk, and they just kind of sit there in the other junk. So now everything kind of square and located, and you know, when you're doing these, you take the body off and on like a million times. So it's kind of important to have something really quick and easy that you can just use to, you know, grab it, tear it off, and it doesn't really do anything to the you know, finish. It won't change anything. So there we go. So I got the front set up, and you can see the front end is great. I got lots of room here. There's quite a bit of flex on there for the suspension, and of course with I'm using the TM8 axle on there right now, and TM8 axle has huge amounts of steering. It's just bonkers. But I discovered an issue while I was putting this together. You'll notice here the leaf spring is catching on the lugs of the pit bull tire. See that right there? So I'm not actually getting full steering while I'm rolling, and that's a problem to me. So what I'm going to do is actually convert this. I made a new axle. Of course we're making new axles. I don't think I talked about this too much yet, but we have a new set. GCM has a new set of axles coming out, which are going to be TMX. So those are TM8. They're 8-bolt. TMX is actually a 10-bolt. X for 10. It's also the 10th year that GCM has been doing scale trucking, so 10 years for us too. Yay, why not? So TMX is the new axle housing. And what I did is I took the same geometry that we used on the Yoda. I want to show this off. This is a 152 Bauhaus axle. This axle has narrow leaf springs on it. So I don't know how to describe this. Basically, the leaf spring here sits underneath the CMAX frame. So you can see it, you can kind of see it here in the video there. The leaf spring is parallel with the frame, but it's actually underneath the frame. So instead of the leaf spring being outside the frame and the same width as the RC four-wheel drive and all these other leaf spring axles, these are actually more narrow by a bunch. So the leaves are brought together, and that's how Bauhaus got full steering with a 152 tiny width axle. So I think you guys have already seen these a million times. If you follow the channel or the Facebook feed or whatever, or JS Scale, you've seen this. But I mean, the 152 axle has a huge tire tuck on this really tiny Hilux body. Now I have the exact opposite problem here, because the comp toy is actually a huge truck. In comparison to that Toyota Hilux, this is a massive truck. And you can see that I've got huge amounts of tire tuck already, and I'm using a 175 wide Terramod axle, TM8 axle. So I'm going to change up some stuff. I made a TMX axle, which is going to take the leaf spring from here and move it underneath the rail. So right now you can see here it's on the outside of the rail, and my new TMX axle, which I've already sent for print, is going to replace this one, and that will get me the leaf under the frame. And if we kind of eyeball this, you can see where I have a contact problem right there. If I put the leaf under the frame and move that over here out of the way, then that should clear my tire lug. So that should have no problem with the steering after that, making contact with the leaf spring. Now, with all that said, we were using the hazard rims at the beginning, and the hazard rims from RC 4-wheel drive, they don't clear Viterra knuckles because they have that really thick bolt pattern right here for the bead locking. You can see the SSD rim has tons and tons of room, like tons of room. It's just swimming in the knuckle, no problem. There's lots and lots of room for everything. And because we have a printed ring inside, it looks like the rod end is like super close to the tire, and that's going to be a huge problem. But remember that the inside of the tire is hard plastic now, right up to this line pretty much almost. And because of that, the tire has no reason to bulge out and make contact with the steering rod. It has no reason to, because all the squish is going to be up here when you're on the terrain. You know, the tire has no reason to bulge up here anymore because the foam can't move, and it's all made out of hard plastic. So, now, tube. I'm going to do tons of tube on this. One of the things that I always wanted to do on my comp trucks is I like it to be able to handle a rollover when it happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but what I'm going to do is actually create an entire tube inside cage. It'll be full competition style, you know, off-road truck style. And part of what I'm going to do in here is have a roll cage on it that, you know, will support all the scale equipment that I need. And then I'm going to checker plate the interior, so it's got a full floor that'll be stainless checker plate. It's super thin. It's the same one that I used on the Blazer, actually. You can see it in here. That's the checker plate I'm going to use on the comp toy. And it looks pretty good, and it's made out of stainless steel. And the trick with that is that I'm going to do the tube here, and then I'm actually going to build the floor out of styrene, really thin styrene, probably only 0.5 millimeter. And then I'm going to sheet the styrene with checker plate. So the styrene and the checker plate glued together will become like this really strong laminate that will support the floor and the interior and all the seats and everything, dash. So that's going to be all based on tube that will bolt onto the chassis at a bunch of different spots. And then the next thing that's happening is bumpers. Part of the tube work is going to be the bumpers and the winch. I'm going to use the SSD aux winch. I had this on my Class 1 Bronco from last year's Call to Crawl series. This was actually mounted in behind, so that's why the fair lead is kind of up funny like that. But basically it'll be on the front of the truck now on the outside, and I still should have huge amounts of clearance in the front to get onto obstacles, so I'm not worried about that. And that's my update. I got the wheels on. A little bit of body mounting techniques to kind of help you guys do your setups, and for the next round I'm going to start on the steel work, which should be really easy and also one of my favorite things to do ever. So it's going to be a whole bunch of comp toy fantastic fabrication here coming up next, and thanks to RC Attic for making fantastic shirts. Eat, sleep, RC. See you guys later.